All right, if I can call this meeting to order, ask everybody to rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. And Mr. Timniak,
Sure.
take us on the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. All right, first up, we have some recognition and the introduction of our new harbor master for Southport Harbor. Is Mr. Billings here? Sir, if you come up to the podium, please. We have a letter here from Governor Ned Lamont appointing you as the new Southport harbor master. First of all, thank you and welcome aboard. Thank you for stepping up to the task here. And if you could, just give us about 30 seconds on, a couple minutes if you like, on why you were interested in being a harbor master and what your thoughts are.
It's a long story to be condensed into 30 seconds, but having been a long-term member of the town of Fairfield, grew up here, went to Roger Ludlow, and I think I've done just about everything on the water, beginning at Southport Harbor. Mm-hmm. So for me, it's a real privilege to come back to my roots, so to speak, where I learned to row. I've windsurfed, I've scuba dove, and all kinds of other things associated with the water. So it's a real privilege, and to have worked or to have known all of the harbor masters, Howard Burr, Pat Carroll, you got me nervous now. Lou Schuler, whom I've just known for a month, but we seem to have a real good bond. And, it's a real privilege, and that's how I take it. And I hope to serve for a long time with efficiency and courteous to all.
Well, great. Well, thank you very much. Any comments from my colleagues?
I would just say congratulations. We're thrilled a long-time Fairfield person who's known the harbor for, I don't want to guess how many years, but a couple years is going to be in charge of it, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Mr. Bateson?
Yeah, likewise. Congratulations and good luck.
You.
We appreciate it.
Thank you.
And sometime we'll have to trade scuba diving stories. But again, welcome aboard, and thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right. Next, item 4 is to hear, consider, and act upon the following appointment for the Land Acquisition Commission: Kevin Helmick, unaffiliated, 105 Doreen Drive, for a term of 11/17 to 11/24. May I have a motion to accept?
I'll make a motion.
A second?
Second.
Any comments?
I have none. Thank you for your willingness to serve.
Is he here?
Is Mr. Helmick here?
I don't see him.
I didn't hear notice that he would be.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. No. Thanks for serving. I read his resume. I like the background, finance. I wish him well.
I think he's got a strong accounting background. I think that's going to be helpful, and certainly in any considerations by the Land Acquisition Committee, and I concur. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, back to the board. Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Moving on. Next up, Director of Public Works. Mr. Carey here? Oh, there you are.
Interim director.
Yes.
So I'm Brian Carey, Conservation Director, Interim Public Works Director for the town of Fairfield. I'm just coming here to update the board regarding the schedule for the South Benson dredging project, which actually started mobilizing today. So we will be starting the dredging on November 4th. We'll formally begin dredging. So we're here just to discuss a little bit about there will be some impacts to Jennings Beach as far as access between November and the end of January. So the board I have in front of you is kind of the timeline associated with the work and how it's going to basically be completed. So we are using an in-water hydraulic dredging technique. The permits from the Army Corps were received in April. We went out to bid. The project's a little bit under $700,000. Mobile Dredging was the contractor who actually was awarded the bid, and Race Consulting will be the oversight engineer contractor. But just the means and methods, the reason why we need to close the breach in kind of a sequential order is we will actually have the dredge working in the channel starting November 4th, and we will actually be pumping the dredge material up onto the beach where it will be placed and graded into the beach. All the material has been tested and approved for beneficial reuse on the beach by both the Army Corps and the DEP. So basically, the area you see, it's cross-hatched here, will be the workers area, and then out in the parking lot. So public access will not be allowed in that area starting towards the middle of this week. The dredge tube discharge pipe will actually come over the jetty and be moved down the beach sequentially as the material is being dredged. So we will have to go and close areas of the beach basically between November 4th and down to January. So there will be some interruption. It is being done by the winter months. That's when the dredge window is approved by the DEP and Army Corps. So we just wanted to make everyone aware of the plan as we proceed.
All right, any questions or comments from the board?
Is it a sand or is it like a mud which is coming up?
Nope, most of the material, I don't have the sieve reports in front of me, but it is basically when we submit the analytical and the reports to the DEP and Army Corps, they would look at that and say whether it's, beneficial reuse on the beach or not. So it all is all compliant with their permits, obviously. It's a sandy material.
It's a sandy material.
I mean, if you look across the way to the spit, there's actually a reference stake on the Bridgeport, I want to say Bridgeport side. It's across the channel. It's still part of the town of Fairfield, but you'll actually see a reference stake that's been placed there. That's the limits of the dredging. So we'll be actually taking out a big part of that spit across the channel.
All right, Mr. Bateson, you had a question?
Yeah, Brian, have we ever closed the beaches when we dredged? Is this new, putting it back on the beach?
So most of the time in Connecticut, you don't see a lot of hydraulic dredging just because offshore and nearshore dredging, as Mr. Timniak stated, is kind of a mucky material. We have closed the beach. We've done mechanical dredging where we've actually done beach nourishment, but we've never done a full hydraulic dredge that I'm aware of, where they've actually, worked through a dredge and then there's a discharge pipe.
Okay,
This is some.
The actual mechanics of how we're going to, it sounds like you're closing the jetty.
The jetty will be closed to this point. There will be some pedestrian access out here. You can see where it's
So the fishermen are still going to be allowed to go down there?
to this point right here. But other than that, yep. Other than that,
Okay, have we posted notice? Do they know this
yep.
is happening?
This is public. Well, first, I'm here for that reason, and secondly,
We've posted signs down there letting them know that the jetty's going to be closed?
it's all getting fenced in and roped off. There'll be signs posted. Yes.
Okay. And I think I got my letter from the marina. The marina, when do we have to have our boats out? The 4th?
17th. So there will be some.
There's some overlap?
There is. So we, as part of, and again, that was all in the press release that was sent out last week, but it very specifically lays out the phases and when there will be restrictions for the boating community and also the members of the public who use the beach down there.
Okay, shame on me, Justin. I didn't open that email, but I assume in that email we received the marina newsletter, that's what was in there? Explaining to all the boaters the limitations on channel access?
Yes, it also has.
Justin, if you're going to answer, you need to come up to the podium.
Yes, that one wasn't in the newsletter per se. It was just our Q Notify blast, so it actually went out to about 1,900 boat interested folks in Fairfield. So it wasn't just the 600 slip holders.
Okay. Brian, if you could, just make sure we post some signs on the jetty so people know, and maybe put something up on the Jennings Pavilion.
Yep.
To let people, I mean.
People will know.
Just to minimize the impact on Town Hall as to what's going on.
Absolutely.
That's all I got.
Can you show us which part of Jennings Beach, how much of Jennings Beach is actually going to be closed?
So unfortunately, because of liability for the contractor, this first part, you can see where it's actually labeled Phase 1 beach access, November to January.
A tad
1st.
smaller than we can.
Yeah, I know. I'm sorry, but this is on the town website under the public. It's right on the front page for the public notice. This second area will be closed November 15th to January 31st, and this last area will be December 1st to January 31st.
So does it close when the middle section closes? Is the first section open?
No.
No, okay.
Because there's going to be a pipe that's actually running the length of the beach.
So it's going from J1 to J6.
Yeah, but we've tried to phase it in a manner that is least impactful to the residents for the beach.
Gotcha.
This is, the hydraulic dredging is a lot less complicated than mechanical dredging, and actually barge the material over. There's a big beneficial reuse to being able to use the sand and not have to move it off-site. And basically, it's doing a beach nourishment at the same time that we're actually dredging the channel. As part of the bid, they were able to quote either mechanical or hydraulic dredging. The low bid is using a method of hydraulic dredging, so we're happy with that.
As you close off sections of the beach, in essence, the entire beach from the parking lot to the water is going to be closed off.
So the parking lot will remain open. We're just going to
Correct.
close the areas of
Right.
the walkway.
From the edge
Yep.
of the parking lot
Correct.
to the water will
That's
be
right.
closed off. I was just
Yep.
trying to, for those folks that are used
Yes.
to walking their dogs
Yeah,
down over that time, I'm trying to get a clear picture of what they will be able to do or not do. What's the restriction on dog access to that part of the beach?
So we're talking, the whole project's slated to take basically 2 months. And again, I know the writing is small on here, but it is up on the town website. It will be closed, sequentially as we move the pipe. The pipe is a large 8-inch discharge pipe. You wouldn't be able to pick it up, but it will be, pieces will be added as areas of the beach are filled.
So as I'm trying to look at what you have there,
So
I'm looking at the first third from the marina,
Over.
the third of Jennings will be closed starting November 4th.
Correct.
Then roughly sometime in early December through,
So this another 2 weeks. So November 15th to the 31st will be closed.
Okay.
And then December 1st to the 31st will be closed.
okay.
And again, that's worst case scenario.
And that will be clearly marked off as those closures.
Correct. So
proceed.
as we close it, we'll actually close the walkovers.
Okay.
They'll be posted and it will be very evident that that's where you can and cannot go.
Okay, so the beaches then, what will remain open is the beaches along Penfield?
Correct. Sasko, Southport,
Okay,
Pine Creek.
all right. Mr. Bateson?
Just a quick thing, Brian. So do you envision when they stage from 1, 2 to 3, is there going to be snow fencing here blocking egress?
Yes. Yes, there will be.
Okay, and that's
It's
gonna be up
referenced
to
on the map.
The contractor's going to be maintaining that?
Yep, he will be maintaining that.
All right. Mr. Timiak, did you have a follow-up?
Hey, one more. Oh, yeah. Have we just double-checked to make sure nobody has any bonfire permits for that
Yes,
timeframe?
I think that was already done with Anthony. Season's over.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we understand that this is an impact to residents, but based on the dredging window, the permits, and
You're going to get phone calls.
it's absolutely, but there's really no other way to do this that would be less impactful to get this project completed.
Any thoughts on how long this dredging will last for? When do you anticipate the
So
next
maintenance dredging is normally between 10 and 20 years, depending on storms,
Okay.
When was the last time we did this one? This has been problematic, though, this change.
I don't know.
Okay.
20 years, maybe?
All right. Any other comments from the board?
I'm good. Thank you, Brian.
Thanks.
Brian, thank you very much.
Yep.
Thanks for the update. And again, the reason for this presentation was to make sure we're doing everything we can to get the word out to boaters and anybody else who uses Jennings Beach over the next few months. All right, next up, and hear an update from the H. Smith Richardson Clubhouse Building Committee. Mr. Curley.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Today I wanted to provide this board with an update on the status of the building committee's work and the clubhouse project. The building committee was formed at the beginning of last year, and we are on the verge of potentially starting construction with the hope of completing it Labor Day of next year. Some of the materials, I believe, have been shared with you, but there was a subsequent meeting by the building committee after the deadline to submit these materials, so I have a couple of supplemental pages that I can share with you, but we'll walk through this deck relatively quickly. First page is the timeline for the project. It actually it was printed December 5th of 2018, and the reason I left this timeline unchanged is because we are on track with this original timeline, fast forwarding 10 months. If you look near the bottom of the, about 4 lines up from the bottom, the award contract, the blue star is October, the end of October of 2019. That's exactly where we are. So since we secured funding and went through the funding approval process with the various boards, we've gone through 3 rounds of estimates with 2 different firms, trying to make sure that we had as tight a number and controlled process. We've gone through some preliminary reviews with the building department. We've gotten our approvals from conservation and the town plan and zoning commission as well. So the next, what's really kept us busy over the last month and a half or so is the actual RFP process for the general contractors. We went out to bid. Our construction budget, if you look to page 4, our construction budget was $5.45 million. We have roughly a $550,000 contingency, so round numbers, we've got a $6 million number to work with. We had 7 qualified bidders, and you can see 6 of the 7 bidders were above budget. Taking into consideration the contingency, all 7 bidders were above budget, excluding the contingency. Obviously, we want to make sure that we move forward with an adequate contingency, so we're not necessarily interested in spending the contingency at the bid stage. So we've been working with the purchasing department to try and see if we can close the gap between the lowest qualified bidder and our construction budget. Because really we have three possible alternatives at this stage. One, we can try and adjust the project in a manner that is that allows us to move forward with the funds that have been approved. Chris, you mentioned at one stage early in the process that we need to be careful not to make penny wise, pound foolish choices at the end to just get this across the finish line, and the building committee has taken that to heart. We really don't want to make sure we don't want to make mistakes, and we want to make sure that the end product is a quality product. So. One step is, can we close this gap in a way that is still responsible? The second is we come back to the town bodies and ask for more money. The reality of that consideration is if we do go through that process, it's probably going to delay the project from starting construction in early November to likely March. And because the contractor is expecting to have access to the golf course without public access in November, December, January, February, if they start in March, it's going to be a much more complicated project. So that's a consideration. Probably would take 12 months to complete instead of 10. So we're certainly not excited about the idea of coming back for more money, not to mention the fact that nobody wants to ask the town for more money. So that's the other thing. The third alternative is to delay the project, leave the redesign the project in a manner that allows us to work with the budget we have, but do it shrink it enough where we're not where we're able to make changes and fit within the likely bidder's scope. Problem with that is, based on where these bids have come in, we could reduce this project size by $1.5 million and still end up with bids that are over budget. So we're really concerned that that's really not a realistic. We run a tremendous amount of bid risk if we actually redesign the scope of the building and go out for more bids. So we've really been working hard to see if we can close this gap and work with the current bids that we have. And fortunately, there is a path forward. the work that really we've done over the last week to 2 weeks or so. I'll give you these, and I've got extra copies in case anyone else needs these. And I'll walk you through these. Put that there. You can see in the upper left-hand corner is our original budget, 5450 for construction. We've got FF&E of 140, fees and expenses of 878, and the contingency of 551, totaling the 7020. In addition to looking at the construction budget specifically, we are a year wiser and smarter in terms of knowing where the fees and expenses might fall out. So what we were able to identify is things like we really don't need $100,000 in our budget for loose furniture. We can reduce that to $50,000 and still move that $50,000 to help close that gap on the bid. Another example would be audio-visual equipment, that all the wiring would be done by the general contractor, but we really don't have to fit out $25,000 worth of AV in the building, so we can take that money and move it. The best example is the temporary pro shop line. We had budgeted $30,000 for portables so that the pro shop can operate next year. If we're able to keep this project on schedule, we can set up the pro shop in what will be the cart barn bag storage area temporarily for next year and save $30,000 in the portable expense. That's just rent. So we went through each of these line items. We had budgeted for potential legal fees as we went through the approval process for town plan and zoning and conservation, and fortunately did not need to spend that money. So point being, we really took a look at our budget on a line-by-line basis, and we're able to identify roughly $200,000 that could help shift and close this gap. And we did need to make some changes to the project. If you look to the second page, this is a list of some of the items that we looked at. We talked to both DPW and Parks and Rec and identified that we have, for Penfield Pavilion, for example, we have a fully built-out kitchen, but for Jennings and we don't, and the vendor provides their kitchen equipment. So one path forward is to not build out the kitchen completely, which would actually give us more flexibility as the Golf Commission goes for a concessionaire contract, because one thing we've identified is one vendor may want a pizza oven and another vendor might not. So the other benefit of that is a lot of restaurants won't necessarily use brand new kitchen equipment, and they'll repurpose equipment from a auction sale or things like that. So it's very likely that a concessionaire can build out the kitchen in a manner that they would prefer to be done and at a much more cost-effective way. So we transferred those funds over to help close the gap. But as we go through all of these different items, the bottom line where we end up is we have about $5.6 million available for the construction budget together with the VE list, and we're able to preserve a $501,000 contingency as we start this project. So our expectation is that we're going to ask the first selectman and the director of purchasing to take the next steps to make an award for the contract, and the original expectation timeline on a micro level was they were going to start the week. Golf operations was going to close on Sunday, November 3rd as the final day. They may be able to stay open for another week or two because these last couple of weeks have slowed down the process by a week or two. But ultimately, I believe we're in a position where we can recommend an award and stay relatively on track. So I'll pause there and see if there are any questions.
Any questions from the board?
No, it sounds like you guys spent a lot of time trying to figure out a path forward without asking for some money. I appreciate that, especially what we're going through now. And then, you know what, it circles back to the conversation we had with Mr. Kleban when we were going through the, the theater downtown. And I mean, he had a whole separate fundraising section of the whole thing too. And just to try to close some extra loose ends there. And, when you think about it, like he's got a big donation wall coming up and things like that. And I'm sure he's going to make it artsy. So I think finding an extra $500,000 through value engineering is pretty prudent on your part. So you have the flexibility, especially with the qualified engineering or builder list bidder. So, yeah, I think there's the path forward, and if things go off the rails, I would certainly recommend you come back to it. But sticking on this time schedule, I think, is of utmost importance because you do have a bid locked in.
Right.
If we were to delay this more, you'll end up with a smaller project, and it'll probably cost just about as much, if not more, if you re-engineer and then put it out, in 6 months or something, you get brand new, fresh numbers, could really backfire.
Yeah, completely agree. That's a consideration that our committee didn't take long to debate because I think there was the general consensus. So we were really very motivated to try and close this gap without having to ask for more money or redesign the building.
Okay. Mr. Bateson, any questions?
Yeah, Craig, just to clarify, it looks like what I'm seeing here is the options for the next step is the building committee is basically already chosen option one and worked through a scenario to value engineer to get you to the number you need to be.
Just in terms of clarifying on that point, our building committee is meeting tomorrow night to actually make that decision and potentially make that recommendation. I wanted to get in front of this group first to see if there were any reservations, but we've been working the last 2 weeks or so based on that assumption. But certainly, if the numbers did not add up, if we had to make cuts to the project that would cut beyond the fat and into the muscle and bone, then we would come back with a hard ask to go down option 2 or option 3, which would delay the project. But certainly, I think we're all a bit relieved when the numbers seem to come together over the last 2 weeks or so. And one thing you'll note is that last page, there were a couple of, a number of items. The last page reflects all the BE items that were rejected. I think some of them are self-evident that there were just either quality issues or maintenance issues which we didn't want to keep. For example, it made no sense to replace the tile work in the bathroom with a painted wall because that could potentially lead to mold and mildew issues. So if it was a quality or maintenance issue, we brought DPW and Parks and Rec into the discussions over the last 2 weeks and made sure that they were on board with all of them. And I was very happy that it was a very collaborative and positive result.
So page 3 on your handout is rejected VE.
Correct. Yeah.
Rejected, but stuff you don't want to touch yet.
Yeah, the number one thing on the list there was about $65,000 to redesign the roof. After that recommendation from the contractor, all of these numbers came from the contractor, by the way. Purchasing and Collier's, our owner's rep, work to get them to populate these numbers. So they're solid in terms of what the adjustment reflects. But our architect recommended that we not accept that because it would cost him probably as much to redesign the roof to reflect that benefit, so we would get virtually a net zero.
I'm good for now.
All right. Thank you, Craig. We touched base briefly over the weekend. You asked me to follow up with purchasing to make sure that we could kind of move this forward on a timely basis. I think one of the questions that came up was we had, in fact, this board, I think, had taken out, I'm going to say roughly $280,000 out of the project for paving of the parking lot.
Yeah.
And that would get approved at a later budget because we wouldn't be getting into that phase of the project until next fiscal year at some point.
Right.
The other question that came up in that discussion was the subservice prep. About $170,000. Is that covered in the building committee budget?
Well, certainly what's covered in the building committee budget is all the grading work by the general contractor that will frame out all the islands and curb work, and they will basically do a grind and fill of the existing and regrade what's there. What I guess might be a question mark is if what's there is not adequate, whether that's a risk that is to be covered by DPW when they finish the project or not. Certainly, all of the framework and all of the initial grading work, including all the drainage for conservation, is part of the general contractor's work and scope. I guess the analogy that would be a good one is we'll do all the sheetrock work, but DPW needs to do the tape and compound and finish work.
Okay, I guess where'd that $170,000 number come from then?
So our landscape architect, when the RFP went out, asked to include a line item for potential addition in case what's the subgrade is not thick enough, for the lack of a better word, deep enough, what the cost would be for the additional potential additional fill that would go before the blacktop finish grade. Now, 170 was the number that was provided by this particular architect, but we had, GC, but we had each of the different bidders provide numbers that ranged from $20,000 to 80, everywhere in between. They were kind of an outlier in terms of the number, but it really, I don't think it's anyone's expectation that the fill that's there or the grind and regrading will be insufficient. What has been a topic of discussion over the last week or two with purchasing, the Director of Purchasing, Gerald Foley, has been reluctant to move forward with any award until he knows that there's funding secured for the parking lot to be completed. Now, and as you mentioned, Mike, at the January 2nd meeting earlier this year with this board, when the funding was approved, the $280,000 was pulled out. I had expressed a concern that I wouldn't want to see this project held up because we didn't have the funding available to finish the project. And I think the response from this board was that, well, that's not something that the building committee or this project should worry about. It really is going to fall on the DPW side to manage their budget. And I mentioned at the time that I would stand shoulder to shoulder with the Director of Public Works when they go through their budget approval process to make sure that there was an extra $280,000 available.
Yeah, at least based on my conversation with Mr. Foley this afternoon, the 280 seemed to be something that wasn't going to be a holdup. The issue he raised to me was this other 170, which we hadn't had a chance to talk about. And I was just trying to figure out at one point we'll know that, or perhaps since Mr. Carey's here, if he could address what he sees as part of that, just so we kind of, it's kind of like one question is, what is the real number? Yeah. When will we know what it is, and what are the options for funding that, I guess?
So that ad alternate for $178,000 is for the base layer material, meaning that we'll reclaim the existing parking lot, and then basically to put the subgrade down, we would, process it out and roll it, and then we'd put a proctor test to it, and if it fails that proctor, which I don't anticipate it would do, then we would have to truck all that material out. But I think that's absolutely worst case scenario. Now, again, I won't know until they do the grading, but there are things you can do to basically fix the subgrade while it's out there. So that is absolute worst case scenario.
Okay, the question then becomes, when will we do this? When will we know whether we need to spend any money on this?
So as soon as the demo is completed, we basically, and I'd have to look again back through the construction time frame about when they would come in and actually strip all of the asphalt parking lot, the sub base, because they'll stack that and stockpile it on site. At that point, we could run proctor test on it to determine whether or not it'd be suitable reuse material. So wouldn't be something way at the end of the project. It would be something, maybe a quarter of the way through. We would, all the site work's got to be done first. They'd be demoing. They'd put the foundation in, and then, basically all the steel would go up. And then at that point, we'd probably be looking at the material. So we would know way before if that is a problem or not.
My question is, in terms of fiscal years, is that fiscal year 21 or fiscal year 22?
It would be fiscal year '21.
All right, so we're going to be putting a budget together for
That's
that
correct.
fairly shortly rather. How do we know how much money to include in that budget to cover this possible scenario?
So if we were to make the award, that's something we'd have to talk with the contractor about immediately. But again, it's most likely worst case scenario. We have at Public Works, we have a very good understanding that most of the time when we reclaim a parking lot, that the subbase will be, qualified for reuse. So we could do that quickly.
One thing I do want to interject on that point, though, is I think the intention of this board and ultimately what was approved by the three boards was that the parking lot was part of the project that should be out of scope for the building committee and the ultimate funding, the 7.02 million. I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't concern ourselves with it, but given that I believe part of the motivation to pull that funding out of the project budget was because DPW could do it more in a more cost-effective way than working through the general contractor. So I believe it was a mistake to include that ad alternate in the RFP in the first place. It was not discussed by the building committee at all. It was added by the architect through purchasing without consultation to the building committee. So that was an unfortunate misstep, in my opinion. Again, I'm not suggesting that we should gloss over this point at all, but I do think that we should, if we were to, because of the timing of having to get started before we'll know what this might be, presents a bit of a catch-22.
Gotcha. Any comments from the board?
Nothing. Thank you.
All right. Yeah, I think that given the timing, we probably need to agree with purchasing and Public Works as to what a reasonable number is so that they have that in their planning for next year's budget process. Because, whose jurisdiction it comes in, regardless of whose it is, sooner or later somebody has to write out the check if that becomes a real expense.
Yep.
And I think that's the challenge, is what's a reasonable estimate for that, what should be reserved, if no other word, in case that comes to fruition, so that the project itself isn't held up in mid-form at that point trying to get additional funding.
Right, right. But I do believe that the original language that was discussed on January 2nd was, and I have the minutes here, but Selectman Bateson and Selectman Timniak indicated that they wanted the bond resolution reduced further and suggested removing paving, curbing, and milling costs from the bond resolution if DPW agrees that the work can be performed by their group. So I think it's pretty clear that the cost should not be part of the 7.02 that was approved, but I do agree that we need to work with DPW to make sure that that cost is identified and part of the submission for the operating budget cycle. I just wouldn't want to see our project slowed down or potentially just over the cusp of making some cuts that would compromise the project.
Okay. Any further comments from the board?
No.
Thanks,
Craig.
Mr. Curley, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next up, from the fire chief, to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the fire chief. Whereas it is in the best interest of the town of Fairfield to expend a total of $121,242 over a 3-year period on lighting, electronics, and software for the U.S. Coast Guard interoperability, hazmat detection, and engine replacement for the fireboat Marine 228. $90,931.50 of said project cost to be funded by a grant available from the Federal Department of Homeland Security, DHS FY 2019 Port Security Grant Program, PSGP, number EMW-2019-PU-00101-SOU, and 25% match from the town of Fairfield at $30,310.50. Now, therefore, be it resolved that First Selectman Michael C. Tetro, First Selectman of the town, be and hereby is authorized to accept the name of and on behalf of the town of Fairfield, a Federal Department of Homeland Security grant in the amount of $90,931.50. And further resolved that the first selectman is hereby authorized on behalf of the town of Fairfield to sign and execute any and all necessary documents to secure said grant. And further resolved that $121,242 is hereby appropriated to fund said project costs. May I have a motion to accept?
I'll make a motion.
A second.
Second.
All right. Chief, you're up.
Dennis McCarthy, Fire Chief. Thank you very much. What you have before you is our application for you to accept this grant. We have a 2008 Metalcraft fireboat that we received from the city of Bridgeport when they upgraded and received a grant for a new boat. And we have maintained that boat using our operating funds. As we anticipate, we apply every year for sustainment money to help offset the cost of maintaining the vessel. We're fortunate this year to receive an award for $121,000, 25% town match. 1/3 of the town match will be absorbed in the fire department operating budget for apparatus maintenance in this fiscal year. There's a 3-year performance period, so we will budget approximately $4,000 in fiscal year 21, and then $15,000 in fiscal year 22. The last portion of the fulfillment of the grant will be to replace the outboard motors.
Any comments from the board?
Thank you. I absolutely support this. How much were we spending a year maintaining the 2008 boat we had?
Approximately $10,000.
Yeah, so this is pretty close to a wash.
Yep.
You know, get a new upgraded boat. So, all right, yeah.
And at the end of, if I may, at the end of the project, when we replace the motors, we'll certainly surplus the outboard motors for recreational use and
whatever.
receive some credit for that.
Great, perfect.
Any other comments or questions?
No, not at this time.
Chief, is this replacing money currently in the operating budget?
No, we don't designate money for, we have a general budget for apparatus maintenance. We do spend somewhere between approximately $10,000 every year to maintain the boat. And this we have that money available to us this year for the match. At some point, we would have to budget for these items at considerable impact on the budget. So it does not appear in the budget right now, but certainly does give us relief.
Okay, very good. Any other comments from the board? Mr. Bateson.
Yeah, Chief, when you guys sit down and you do your budget, when you look at an asset like this, I mean, do you feel that you're getting your money's worth out of it, that the taxpayers, that we're getting use out of this? I mean, what do we use it for?
So both the police department and the fire department have marine assets. Not only do we have this boat, we have an inflatable, rigid hull inflatable in the Southport Marina, or in Southport Harbor at Yacht Yard. When we look at the number of responses that we make in a year, we certainly have to make that qualified assessment. Is this a good value for the town of Fairfield? And over my 4 years here, we have seen time and time again where the fire department boat is the first on the scene and has effected rescues not only for people in the water, but boaters in distress. We do get quite a bit of use out of the boat, and to great value, given that in winter months we are able to mobilize 24/7.
Okay, that's what I was getting at. So let's say we get a 911 call, there's something going on in the water. I guess I was looking at the departments, police and fire. It's more along the lines, you guys are communicating, saying we can get there way faster.
So we have the regular discussion with the police department to make sure that we're working in unison. Unlike any other type of emergency call, there is nobody else coming to help. And our approach with the police department is when they are the primary responders, and we back them up. If in the middle of wintertime we're the only boat in the water, they certainly mobilize and back us up. And I think that it's an important consideration for first responder safety.
Okay, so it is in the water 24/7, 365?
365.
Okay. And when you say that there's no additional long-range costs, I imagine we have to get our guys certified to be on the boat, right?
Yeah, all of that work has been done. We have qualified boat operators. We train regularly.
And that's included in your training budget, so you don't consider that an additional burden?
Not an additional cost.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any comments from the public? Seeing none, back to the board. Are we ready to vote?
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right, thank you, Chief.
Thank you very much.
All right. Item 8, next up, from the town attorney to hear, consider, and act upon the following resolution as recommended by the Board of Education. Resolved that the town of Fairfield, by its first selectman, is authorized to enter into a 10-year lease agreement to rent premises located at 3400 Fairfield Avenue, Bridgeport, for the Board of Education's Maintenance Department, Transportation Department, and Central Storage. May I have a motion to accept?
I'll make a motion.
A second?
Second.
All right, who's going to step us through this?
Stanton Lester, Town Attorney. I'm going to let Mr. Papa George from the Board of Ed talk you through the lease particulars, and I'll be here to answer any questions about the lease itself.
Angelos Papa George, Executive Director of Operations, Fairfield Board of Education. So what you have before you is a potential lease agreement for a property that we sought after in Bridgeport, Connecticut. It's just over the Fairfield line. It's approximately 13,000 square foot. It's double the size of the current maintenance department. It will allow us to move 3 departments, maintenance, transportation, and central stores, into one location. And it's at a rate of $10.25 per square foot, as opposed to our past lease, which was at $15.52 a square foot. It's very much built out. It just has some minor requirements. It used to be a cabinet shop, so it's ready, almost ready for occupancy. I don't know if you have any questions about the space or location.
Any questions from the board? Mr. Bateson.
Angelos, I told you you could do it. I knew you'd find something. First of all, I'm very happy for the board. I'm happy that you guys took this board seriously, that there was a situation we wanted to get out of, and I'm happy that you accommodated us. Yeah. I just have a couple of questions on the lease. I'll get to that, Stan, but what are we combining? What operations? We're leaving the trailer?
Transportation trailer, which is approximately, it was purchased 19 years ago as a used trailer for Osborne Hill School.
Who's in there, though?
Our transportation department, which is it's our director of transportation and 3 workers that work underneath him.
Now, how much of a hassle is that going to be to have them away from the buses?
Nothing at all. We've discussed that with the transportation department. It's an old scenario that they have. When the town actually ran the buses, they had to be on site down there. Now that we don't actually run it, we lease it. We have a company that comes out, First Student runs our buses. So there's no need for them to be actually physically on site. The buses are managed by First Student, who will still remain on site down there.
But there has to be some sort of coordination. Let's say a bus driver comes back and says, I got a problem with bus number such and such. Can somebody take a look? Does now somebody have to drive from Bridgeport to Fairfield to look at it?
As far as I
don't know, I'm just trying to envision a scenario where I'm taking people off site. I want to make sure that I'm not interrupting or making an inefficiency in operation.
No, most of what they do now is either by email or phone calls. There's not really a reason for our director or his associates to be on site there. Any problem with the bus is owned by First Student, so they would handle all maintenance issues with it. There may be a time, rare, that there is some type of opportunity that the department chair has to be there, so which he would come over from Bridgeport. It's not far. It's approximately a 3-mile drive.
Angelos, you give good answers.
Yeah. So
You really do.
Angela, can you go over again? We were paying $15 a square foot. Now we're
$15.52 at the Meadow Street location. This current lease is asking for $10.25 a square foot. It's obviously larger in square footage, so the cost will go up slightly. You look like you had another question.
Yeah.
Yep.
I believe that the $10 figure is a triple net figure, so there's expenses on top of that. but from what I understand, it's still less than the gross lease that we were paying at Fairfield, even when you add the nets on.
Yeah, okay.
Approximately $12.42 a square foot when you add the triple net in, based on the limited information the landlords had, because they're actually new owners to the building as well.
Well, I mean, this is something I'm happy to vote for. I know there was a lot of stress and drama going back in June when it was winding down, and we, told there was no other option. You got to approve, you got to, all that stuff. I'm happy to hear that departments are getting centralized. 3 departments are coming together. We're moving a department out of a trailer, which is old, the transportation department. It should be housed in a real building. And we're saving some money, so good.
Mr. Bateson.
Yeah, I want to get into the lease for a second. First of all, before you leave, Angeles, in section 27, where it talks about all the modifications to the building that you want, that satisfies anything you can envision, anything that we have in our current facility, and then some? LED lighting, all that
So
stuff. It looks
we've
like we're
asked-
installing a new door.
That's the landlord's requirements. We do have a small area that we will have to reconfigure and build out. One of the things we asked for in the lease was...
I'm just saying, I want to make sure that we're getting out of the landlord, before we move in, anything that we can that you think we will need.
Yes, we've asked them to do quite a few things, and they've agreed to all of them.
Okay, and I'm assuming that anything that we're going to be paying for is specific to our needs, that the landlord has said, that's not me.
Correct.
Okay. So you've sat down and done your due diligence in that before we even contemplate this facility, this is what I want the landlord to provide.
Correct.
Okay. What about, Stan, it looks like the term on the lease is 10 with an option for 10?
Yes. Just so you'll know, before we go any further, the lease that you have in front of you today.
Is that the Kathleen version from 2 p.m.?
Yes, but that's not the absolute final version. You should understand that. I've been going back and forth with the landlord's attorney, and they've agreed to everything I've asked, and that's in this lease. I did have the Board of Ed send out to KERMA on the insurance stuff. There's a couple of minor things that KERMA sent back. I've sent them to Attorney Marks. I just spoke to her. She hasn't had a chance to go over them with her client, but we both agree that the changes will be minor, and they're not going to affect this lease going forward one way or the other. So, but you should understand that right now.
Okay, so it's going to be 10 years with an option for 10?
Yes.
And it looks like the escalator every year is 2%?
Correct, including for the option period.
Okay, what utilities are we paying when you're saying the triple net?
Everything.
Okay, excluding maintenance on the building?
Well, we have to maintain our premises, but
Yeah, but I'm saying if it's a new roof, that's him.
Yes.
Okay. And what are we doing? The only thing that caught my attention on this, when they came back with the red line version at around 2 p.m., what else is on this property where we're only responsible for 42%? Now all of a sudden they're saying if we get rid of the other buildings, is there other stuff on there?
Yes, there are apparently a couple of small buildings on there. So if you look at the change that was made, we are only responsible to pay the expenses attributable to our premises.
Right.
So whatever else happens, that was one of the things I was concerned with. That's why we changed the language.
Rightly so.
Yeah. So in other words, you can allocate, the land and the building, but only to our premises. We're not paying part of the other premises if they knock the buildings down. I don't know what they're going to do there.
Okay, that's what the language was confusing me. So you're saying if they knock down those other buildings, it should have no impact on what our pro rata share is?
It should not, on what our actual expenses are for the portion of the building that we occupy.
Okay, all right. If you could you just make sure you pay attention to that? Because the way I read it, it sounded like there was a little exposure there that our expenses could go up. That
I believe it says premises. Let me just take a look.
Okay.
What paragraph was that? It was towards the end. Yeah. If you look, it says, in such event, tenant agrees to pay 100% of the building expense.
Which paragraph?
Yeah, what section?
29 on page 17.
Gotcha.
The very last part that was changed. In such event, tenant agrees to pay 100% of the building expenses attributable to the premises. The premises are defined. That's the part that we lease.
Okay, gotcha. That's the correlation I wasn't making. So you're saying premises is specifically defined to what we are renting?
Yeah, it's Yeah, if you look at the very beginning, it's
I didn't get the map.
premises.
We didn't get the map.
No, there's no map, but it defines what the premises are. It's just the part that we actually occupy.
Could someone step us through the timeline? As was pointed out in Clause 27, there's a number of work items that have to be done. When does everything start, and when is that done, and when does the, if you will, rent start?
The rent would start December 1st, and the renovations and the build-out would start November 1st. 30 days to build out, and then December 1st, we would move in and take ownership.
Okay, and the move and everything else, we can affect in
During the
that
time frame of November. With the holidays in there, we figured it would be a good time to get our maintenance out of the schools and into the area to get set up and transferred without disrupting the service to the schools.
Okay, so this will be approved by the RTM at the 28th? And,
Hopefully.
And they'll be ready, if, assuming that goes as expected, they'll be ready to start
Right away.
getting
Yes.
that done. All right, we're reasonably, that seemed like a significant list here.
Nick Asa, Vice Chair of the Board of Ed. Thanks, Mr. Tetro. First, just like to thank you guys for hearing us today in a special meeting so we can get to RTM committee tonight and get this to the RTM for a vote on the 28th. To your point about, I think what you're talking about is timeline and moving expenses. So we do have approximately $141,000 of exposure for moving expenses, build out, running network cables down the telephone poles to get our building connected with our other buildings and our network. There are those expenses and that work to be done. I know Angeles can touch on it, but they've decided to do a lot of the work with our own employees and costed it out that it would be more efficient to use our own manpower versus going out to a contractor, so that was a good significant savings. On consolidating the three operations, just also to note, with regards to transportation, aside from it being a dilapidated trailer, they will not have heat this winter, so the timing of this move, we'll probably have to use some space heaters or whatever is permissible, but will save us from having to invest about $11,000 into that trailer, so it'll be nice to get them out of there. And the consolidation of three programs into one is generally beneficial, and in this case it is. But we have an exposure of about an additional $30,000 a year for lease expenses. So all in with the triple net. So the triple net, we're paying the taxes for that portion of the building, and all the other expenses. So it's still a great deal per square foot compared to where we were. We're getting a great space that's ready for us for the most part, with minimal work on our end. But that $30,000 is going to have to be absorbed by our operating budget. And the Board of Ed is prepared to work to be able to do that for this year and moving forward with mitigating and reducing the impact to the children and the program. So we're going to do that. Going forward to what you're mentioning about the other expenses, the Board of Ed did not anticipate these other expenses. And we do plan to be going to the Board of Finance to request help with these expenses to help us offset it. And what I believe has been discussed with Chairman Flynn and Bob Mayer is trying to use some contingency funds for that. So while it appears, to my knowledge, that those expenses won't come to the Board of Selectmen, I just do want you to be aware of those. And with other big expenses like the roof at Osborne Hill this year that we didn't anticipate that we had to front, and some other unexpected maintenance projects, this will be a big hit, and we're hoping for some support from Board of Finance and the town fund to help us with this. But I think long term, this is a great decision. I think it's a 10-year with a 10-year option and no more than 2% a year, including in the option, is a great opportunity. And I don't know if I can answer any more questions or if you want me to turn it back to Angeles with that.
All right, thank you very much. All right, any further questions from the board?
I got none.
All right, any comments from the public? Please.
Good evening, gentlemen. My name is Roger Rotori. I live at 1310 Melville Avenue. I do have some things that you may want. That's a Google area photo of the premises, also the Bridgeport Board of Assessment field card. Building was built in 1930. It was remodeled, last time it was remodeled in 1976. There's going to be substantial remodeling and what have you there. Also, there's a question of whether or not that building holds the heating for all three, or each of those other two properties have their own heating thing. When I first looked at it, I thought it was a great idea too, and then I looked at the, what we're doing with the other departments at the Board of Ed. They call, one of the things they plan to merge is a central stores. We used to have central stores in the basement of Ward High School. They phased that out into some years ago into just in need delivery at all the schools. Now we seem to be going back there, but we're not using the original space, which is vacant and used for any junk you gotta have and, can't get rid of, they put down there. Apparently there's a box van the Board of Ed owns. I still see that running up and down in front of my house too, so they're using it for something. The other thing is they talk about the transportation department. If there's 3 or 4 people that are there now, and that's what the transportation department is, and they don't need to be there, why can't they find room at the Board of Ed headquarters?
All right.
The other thing is the maintenance. That seems to be the original problem we had with the Julianne property. We want to get them out of there for whatever reason we have. In doing that, did we look at the DPW? They have the newer section, I call it the newer section they've been building onto. Then they have the original old section that are just a bunch of garages. I know the Board of Ed maintenance has used some of those bays to fix their own trucks and to use it for maintenance that they can't apparently even do at the current section. So if they can get a few more, that settles that. And if they need to build another building, the town building maintenance is in one of those metal buildings. There seems to be some area that can probably stick another one next to that and take care of the public works. For what we're going to be paying, I mean, you look at the last year we're paying in this lease thing, the 10th year, it's $150,000 or more that year. I mean, we're talking about $149,000, trailer. We're going to be paying that over and over and over again. So I'm just thinking if there's a different way to do this, less cost, and using town resources, which apparently are available, probably forgotten that they're even there. Seems to be a solution in search of a problem. So,
Okay.
Just suggestions.
All right, well, thank you very much.
Yep.
Any other comments from the public?
Hi, gentlemen. I'm Christine Vitale, Chair of the Board of Ed. I apologize for being late. Thank Mr. Asa for filling in. I just want to, I don't want to repeat what was said, but ask you please just to support this today so we can move forward. We are planning to go to the RTM committee tonight. This action was in large part due to the action taken by your board. We have looked for other space. We've reached out to the town in the past. I can let Mr. Papageorge, if he hasn't already, share that information with you. This enables us to bring all of our transportation, our maintenance, our storage in one facility relatively close to the Fairfield border. And just please ask you to act. Thank you.
Right. Anyone else from the public?
Can I ask Mr.
If you would.
Yeah. Oh, wait.
My name is Peter Belfranco.
If you just say that again at the mic so the folks at home could hear you, sir.
Okay.
My name is Peter Delfranco. I've been a resident and business owner in Fairfield for 25 years. And I can't imagine that we rented that big space for a pile for $9,000 a year, and now we're going to be paying $150,000 a year for a property that's not even part of Fairfield. That's my comment.
Anyone else from the public? All right, seeing none, back to the board. Any follow-up questions?
I do have a follow-up question. Mr. Papageorge, did you look at all town assets pretty thoroughly to see if we could turn anything into this?
We looked at all town assets. We also did a thorough search using Angel Properties to look at all commercial properties available in town. Just to answer a couple questions, DPW is currently bursting at the seams, as they'll tell you. We used to occupy, when we moved into Meadow Street, which was a building that we reduced size to move into back when we moved in, the conditions that we moved in, we were offered 3 bays at DPW to operate our maintenance facility out of there and Meadow Street. And we were also given storage space at the Tungus Hill Garage, State Garage. So since then, we've been removed from DPW, all but a small single bay, which doesn't even house a lift anymore. And the Tungus Hill Garage is to the point where we've had to move all storage out of that. So we've slowly over the years moved everything into Meadow Street, so it's currently bursting at the seams over there. And the other thing was the Central Stores location is at Ward High School. It is still currently being used as Central Stores location. Again, a school that's bursting at the seams, so we're looking to move it out of there to provide more space for activities in the building, including storage, as mentioned, for special needs equipment and students' special needs stuff.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Bateson?
Sorry, the facility at Ward, where is Central Stores? At Ward?
It's actually underneath Ward. If you go in the back by the Blake tennis courts, you'll see there's a garage overhead door there, and that's where our Central Stores is currently located.
Is that down near the Trans Tech area and that, the shops area?
No, well, if you follow that all the way in, you'll get to the dumpsters and then the...
So if I go past the tennis courts on my left, that garage door?
That's it. That's our Central Stores location. That's where all supplies for the schools are delivered to and then brought out through...
All the schools?
All schools, custodial supplies are brought into that location, and then the custodians order supplies, and it comes out of that location out to the schools. By buying the bulk, we get the better pricing.
And that's going to be moved to Fairfield Ave?
Yes.
Okay.
Any further questions? All right, are we ready to vote?
Yep.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All right. Next up, item 9. To consider and act upon tax refunds as recommended by the tax collector in the amount of $6,212.07. May I have a motion to accept?
I'll make a motion.
A second.
Second.
Any further discussion?
I've confirmed the numbers accurate.
All right, good. All right, then all in favor say aye.
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 All right. And then a motion to adjourn, please.
Just want to wish everybody happy, safe trick-or-treating with Halloween coming up. Be careful out there, slow down. We're going to have the hours changing soon. It's going to get darker, so keep that in mind as you're driving around because the kids are still walking home from their fall sports. It's an issue every year. Just want to encourage people to remind that. So thank you.
All right, is there a second?
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.